Hello YouTube! YouTube back with part 2 of my E3 thoughts and whatnot. If you haven't, click annotation if it's there for part 1 for the Microsoft recap. And in part 2 we'll be moving on to Sony and hopefully doing it a little quicker. Good lord, that last one was long. And as I said in the previous one, I did a previous take on the things. And the Sony and Microsoft one, which I had done together at the time, was only 5 minutes longer than the Microsoft one was in a second take. So Jesus Christ, I don't know why it took so long. But anyway, straight on with Sony this time. Now, I never know what to make of Sony in general for their presentations. Very, very hit and miss, and harder for me to predict at least. So one thing is usually true, that they often open with something odd, and this year was no different. Some kind of presentation and, you know, swirling, you know, gadgety icons, and I just wrote down, looks like a bad James Bond movie start, and kind of that's what it was. But, you know, Jack Trenton came on stage and he was really going fanboyish on it, and, you know, comparing E3 to the Super Bowl, and yeah, very, I suppose, hardcore, and I felt a little too much so, because it was very much like, we're great because you're great, and because you're great, we're great, and it's all great. And it's like, my god, all this great. It's like fucking Tony the Tiger. We're great. So just get on with it. Well, finally, I mean, he did mention Kaz was in the audience, but sadly he didn't come up to give us any memorable quotes. What a shame. So they did get on with it, and I have to give them kudos. Unlike Microsoft, where I felt that they played it very safe, and to a certain degree I'll probably say about Nintendo as well, Sony led off with the sequel, or the follow-up more than to Heavy Rain, called Beyond, and that is an interesting choice. I mean, Heavy Rain was a good game, and in my opinion, I enjoyed it. It's a different type of experience. It's very cerebral. It's basically an interactive, you know, adventure, interactive fiction type game, and it's not your typical show-stopping number. And it's not going, it sold well and was a hit. Obviously they got a sequel, but it's not going to really move platforms. It's not going to, at least I don't think it is, have the same sort of appeal as, say, a Halo or a Mario or those type of things, or even some of the other games at the show. Now, that's not to say it wasn't a good decision. I think it actually showed some bravery to actually do something a little different, and to open up with something that wasn't an FPS type of thing. You know, it wasn't a Killzone or whatever. So I thought that was a good choice, and it looked interesting. Kind of all about afterlife and whatnot, and yeah. I wouldn't probably pay full price when it comes out, but when it gets reduced like Heavy Rain did, then I'll probably pick it up. So they followed up then with PlayStation All-Stars Super Smash Brothers Battle Royale. No, wait, sorry, just All-Stars Battle Royale, aka Smash Brothers. So clearly and unashamedly a rip-off of Smash Brothers. I think like Sony even have it in their tags to either their YouTube feed or their Twitter feed that had Super Smash Brothers. Like it's not even, they don't even attempt to cover it over. Personally, I didn't think the demonstration looked all that great. I mean, I love Smash Brothers, don't get me wrong, but they kept going on about leveling up and supers and all this sort of stuff, and it kind of actually sounded like it made it more complex than it needed to be. I mean, one of the beauty things about Super Smash Brothers is it's really simple. You just pick your kind of favourite recognisable character and jump in and start pummeling away at things. You don't have to worry about leveling up things, and there is depth to the game, don't get me wrong, but by and large, it's like Mario Kart. You don't need to know about it. And personally, I don't think that PlayStation itself has, the branding has as much history to kind of delve into to build this type of game. I could be mistaken, but whereas Nintendo have a lot longer with a lot more franchises, I just didn't like looking at the characters like Sly Raccoon and whatnot. I don't think that they quite have the same gravitas as, say, a Mario or you know, a Zelda, Donkey Kong. It just there's not as much of a stable of franchises there. I mean, even kind of borne out by the fact that they unveiled 2 new characters, Nathan Drake, fair enough, that I can understand that, and Big Daddy and Little Sister from Bioshock. And that's not even a PlayStation game. It's a cross-platform game. So, are they already out on the first game of unique PlayStation franchise characters that they have to delve into third-party releases? I mean, Smash Brothers got to its third game before it did that, and even those characters weren't from the Nintendo side. It was actually requests by Kojima and Yuji Naka to put in Sonic and Snake. It's, I don't know, it just kind of made me think, I suppose, that this really doesn't feel like there's as much there. I'm sure if you probably grew up with the PlayStation, you'd probably have more nostalgia and maybe appeal to you more. I'm sure it'll be a fun game though, anyway. So that was it. Oh yeah, that was after half an hour of the show, or close to half an hour. That was all the show. Just 2 games. I thought in Microsoft one they kind of dragged out some of the gameplays, but in the PlayStation or the Sony one, very much so. Out of all the conferences, Sony showed the least games. Now I know some people would say, well, more of the games appeal to them, but kind of like I touched upon it with the Microsoft one, having all of the games appeal to you is perhaps an indication that it's not a good presentation. This is a platform. It should appeal to a broad spectrum. There should be some games that should appeal to you. Some you might be half interested in, others you should not be interested in at all, but you could see how others would be interested in it. Kind of like I mentioned about the Nike, Connect thing and Wii Fit and whatnot. Not everyone is going to be interested in everything. It'd be kind of like if Universal or one of the movie studios were to do kind of a 2012, this is the movies we're going to release, and all they were going to release was kind of like shooting, action movies or rom-coms. It'd appeal to one audience and one audience only, and they'd be, oh, this is great, this is the best year ever. But then everyone else would be like, well, there's nothing for me. And I kind of felt that, maybe there was a little bit of this in the Sony one. Certainly I felt that the list was very barren. Now what they showed was quite good, but it felt very empty. As it just kind of, when I noted down the timestamps of half an hour and we've only seen 2 games. I mean, even the Microsoft one was way ahead of that. So then they started going on about PSN and PSN Plus and the various things they've done with it, and it went all, I've got a note, gone all Oprah, and because there's a free one for everyone in the audience, again, bit fanboyism. I would have said gone all gay burn, but I'm guessing most people probably wouldn't get the reference. So they then started to kind of talk about the Vita, led into the Vita section. Now I expected the Vita to be a big part of the show. It's their newest platform, it's only a few months out worldwide, and it needs a bit of a boost. It needs to see some killer apps to kind of get people to say, yes, I want to plunk down the cash. I mean, we've seen it with the 3DS. People are a little more reserved about spending big money on new hardware unless the software's there. And they didn't really show much. In fact, they started going on about, gotta read my notes on this one more clearly, Retro City Ransom and PS1 Classics, YouTube and Hula, and some sports stuff was going to be, music streaming. And I was like, oh, what, you mean these things aren't on the Vita? PS1 Classics? They're on the PSP already. Like, why aren't they on the Vita? I was actually surprised by these features. It's like, you're telling me these are new things? Wow, I would have been shocked if I bought one and didn't have that stuff. Especially the stuff like the PS1 Classics that is on the PSP. So that was more of literally just shocking, that's all I can say. They did then start to show 2 games. I think they mentioned a third one, but they actually only showed footage of 2 games for the PSP, PS Vita, and I found that again a bit surprising. Nintendo in their conference, as I will discuss more later, said that they're not going to talk about the 3DS, but they mentioned 3 games. So the system they're not talking about, they mentioned more games than Sony made about their newer platform. Very surprising. And they mentioned Call of Duty Declassified, I think it was called, Black Ops Declassified, and they made a point about saying how this was going to be just like the console experience, but its own unique game. But just like the console experience, it's going to have all the multiplayer and all that sort of stuff. And I couldn't help but feel that if it's going to be just like the console experience, why not just port the console game? Why make it an entirely new one? I mean, the Vita is meant to be a very powerful system, meant to be getting up there towards PS3 capability. Modern Warfare 2, that was ported to the Wii. You know, these games can run on a much lower powerful system. So if you just want the console experience, then just have the console game. Like, why make its own? It just seems a bit odd. I'm sure it'll be a good game. I'm just surprised that it's entirely unique. Now, they also had Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. Again, they said it's a unique version of Assassin's Creed 3. If they tailor it to make it suit it the handheld play, or you know, more towards that form factor and time frame where you might be playing shorter stints, fine, I can understand having a specialized game. But if you're tailoring it, this is going to be just like the console experience. Seems a bit odd. Then they talked about there was going to be tie-in with a bundle and whatnot. Okay, yeah, white. I'm not a massive fan of white systems, so whatever. They talked about Assassin's Creed 3 and on the PlayStation. I have to say, that actually looked pretty good. My notes here: nautical hijinks. It looked pretty good. It was like, you know, battling it out on the sea and whatnot. Not what, if you were to say to me Assassins, that's not what I would have thought. But yeah, looked interesting, surprisingly so. And Far Cry 3 then. I talked a fair bit about Far Cry. Again, just like Assassin's Creed, we seem to be into the third party section, because that's going to be multi-platform. Now, they talked about some exclusives on Far Cry 3. Definitely there's going to be some DLC. But they talked about this 4-player co-op and this map editor. Now, I couldn't tell from that, did they mean those features are going to be exclusive? I suspect not. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if the map editor is not on consoles, but we'll see. It looks impressive. Not a massive fan of Far Cry games. To be honest, I didn't think it looked that much better than number 2 from what I recall, but it's been a long time, so I could be totally misremembering. Or, you know, the way you imagine things in your mind. So, again, third party stuff, so it's nice to see that they're on the platform, and it's a few more, I suppose, hardcore games. And that's, by this stage I was noticing, wow, all Sony have focused on, and we're well over halfway through the conference now, is 4 games. And then 2 for the Vita. So 4 for the PS3, sorry, and 2 for the Vita. And all of them are more hardcore or traditional experiences. I could see why that would appeal to a lot of people, but I was surprised at the kind of singular focus for their presentation. They did then bring out what I think is going to be potentially their big breakthrough, or could be, depending on how it goes. It's hard to read. Basically, they brought out the Move section, like Microsoft are going to do to Kinect. Now, to be fair, the Move is, as far as I can tell, it seemed to bomb. At least Microsoft had a bit more of gimmick value with it, and it got bundled up, and they did push it harder, and it was more different. The Move just looks ugly. It looks like a lollipop style thing, and it doesn't distinguish itself enough from the Wii. But they did bring out this new AR gaming or augmented reality gaming experience called Wonderbook. So basically, you get this book, and it'll be an AR device, and you flick through, and it will be read by the camera, and you can interact with it. So the demo, the launch book, is going to be by J.K. Rowling, which that's a good way to go with it, and it's going to be called the Book of Spells, tying into the Harry Potter universe, or the Pottermore universe as they're calling it. Now, if you could choose one author to launch this type of interactive book type of experience and have it kind of reach a wide audience, or a large audience anyway, it would be J.K. Rowling. And to be honest, when I heard him mention J.K. Rowling and essentially an exclusive product, I was like, you know, that'll probably shift more consoles than anything else they've mentioned. I mean, if you look at something like, say, Beyond, might be more interesting, at least to adult players. But I'd say, if done well, the Wonder Book is by far and away the bigger item. So I can understand why they want to spend a fair bit of time on it. There was a few technical glitches and whatnot, but it was nothing major. You get that with AR stuff. So basically, you know, you could read along with the book, and you could do the spells on the move, and and they had these diorama type of things, and you had to like, it would be interactive. So like a dragon would come out and set fire to thing, and you had to put out the fire, and you had to unlock something with the Alohomora spell and things like that. It looked interesting. It looked like a really good way of broadening appeal of the PlayStation brand, and I think that's a very, very key aspect of the Wonderbook. Sony and Microsoft have a massive difficulty in targeting the younger audience. It's what makes Nintendo successful. They might be saying, "Oh, it's only to kiddies console," but they get them young, and at least a certain proportion follow them through for life. It's kind of like the whole Mickey Mouse thing. You get them young, and you have the fans there. The Disney kind of philosophy as well, and it works very well because it appeals to a different sensibility. Now, the Wonderbook, I think, could have a similar type of appeal. So, say for example, a parent, they have their PlayStation 3 for their games or for a Blu-ray player or whatever, but they have a child or they have children, and they're into Harry Potter. Geez, we get them the Wonderbook, and they might only be 3 years old, and they're kind of going through the book with their parents, and being involved with the interactive experience. But as that goes on, they maybe they grow up a little more, and they might try out a few games. They'll have Spyro and whatever else, and become more and more ingrained into the branding. I mean, it's a very clever young launch point. They can do older experiences, naturally, but I think that the key element is that will allow them to perhaps target the market that Nintendo have almost had to themselves. So that was kind of nearly their big item, really. And after that, then they ended up with kind of a side comment nearly about the PlayStation phone stuff that I doubt many people cared that much about. Basically, HTC can make some PlayStation branded phones or something. And they ended up with two kind of the core trailers, where they had God of War, I think it was called Ascension or something, and it looked good. It looked like God of War. To be honest, for a God of War trailer, I was expecting more, something a bit more grand. It looked nice, it looked fine, but it looked like God of War. It did not in any way look like it was going to do anything new or different. Even like I felt Halo and whatnot looked like it might spark things up a little more, and I much prefer God of War to Halo, so that's my opinion anyway. And then finally, and this was a good ending, I have to say, they ended up with a game that I hadn't heard about at all before, and it was called The Last of Us by Naughty Dog. Kind of, following on in a way from Uncharted. You could so see the influence in the graphic style, male, female protagonist type of things there. It looked very impressive, looked like it could be a unique, new, immersive experience. Nice to see them step away from Uncharted. I've personally felt I really liked the first two, kind of got a bit tired of 3 to be honest. I didn't really get into it that much. So it would be nice to see them do something new, and it was a really good kind of surprise ending that was going to appeal to your typical kind of audience, as it were, and was a nice way to balance out the kind of Wonderbook stuff. So you kind of had a bit of both there. I one little touch that I didn't notice, that you could see them taking stuff in and out of the bag, which was their inventory. Often in games you just have this magical bag of inventory stuff, but it was nice to see them actually putting it in and out. I'd be definitely interested to see that one develop, and it was definitely one of the big hits of the show, and a great way to bookend. Sony did a good job in opening and closing well. Probably the best out of anyone, because it was not expected. They were kind of the biggest surprises. They were kind of hoped for maybe, but they were kind of a bit more surprised to them, and they did work well. But having said that, they had very few games. I mean, they had the opening 2 book, at the beginning, and then the closing 2, and they kind of like a couple in the middle. I mean, all told, I think they had about 10 games, but far and away less than anyone else. So I felt that they really padded out their conference, because there wasn't even much in the centre to fill it up. At least I know what Microsoft filled their conference up with, going on about voice commands and so on. I don't know what the hell took Sony so long. To be honest, I felt that was the weakest. I think maybe with the Wonderbook thing could have something big there, and they do have some good core games coming. but I kind of feel that in terms of maybe hitting spectrum, not so good. I know a lot of people who thought Sony did really well because they had those core titles, and I think those core titles are great, but I think I would like to see them have a bit more for everyone, which they didn't have. Which is probably an unusual opinion to have. So anyway, I'm going to quickly try and cover Ubisoft as well. I wasn't actually even planning to watch the Ubisoft conference. As far as I consider, only the platform holders really should even bother having these big conferences, and the others should just have like the general stalls and displays and whatnot. So I don't really usually think of EA, and I think Activision have done before, and Ubisoft. But I know Snestastic said that Ubisoft had actually been really surprising to watch, so I should give them a shot. And to be fair, he was right. They were surprising. They actually showed more games than so they're one publisher, and they showed more games than Sony did for their platforms. That was bad. Now they started off kind of as you'd expect with dancing girls, and some rapper, Flow Rider, I think it was. I guess the dancing girls were better than what Sony opened with, so can't complain there. Not so much sure about Flow Rider. But that was, of course, all for Just Dance 4. Everyone knew that was coming. It's a Wii U game. I think it's on other platforms too. I can't remember. I should have made better notes, but whoever the presenters were, some YouTube guy maybe, Tobuscus or something. I don't know his name. And some woman. I really didn't like them at all. Especially the woman. She was annoying as hell. She kept going on about getting girl wood. Now that's not required. What the hell? It's stupid. And they have a terrible. Their slogan is "Life Powered Play." Oy. Less said about that, the better. Apparently, it gave her girl wood. So they kicked off things then. Well, sorry, they already kicked off things with some dancing, but I suppose the hardcore stuff. Then they had Far Cry 3 and Splinter Cell, which I guess had been kind of seen before. But they look decent if you're into those games. They had an Avengers game then, and that kind of led them into a Wii section or Wii U section. Avengers is also going to be in Kinect. Now, it's impossible to comment on this. It looked like an entirely CGI trailer just to basically say, look, we're making an Avengers game. That's it. Now, it might get you excited because, it's superheroes and whatnot, but just how many superhero games are actually good? You have the Batman games and they're good, Batman Arkham and whatnot, but a lot of superhero games suck, so I'll be very cautious about that one. They did go bring out a dev, Wii U to demonstrate Rayman Legends, and I'll talk about this probably a little bit in the Nintendo part too. But I have to say that was surprisingly good looking. I'm not a fan of the Rayman games, and I was really impressed. I thought that looked like really nice. Something they did in Rayman and what's the other game? Oh yes, the last game I mentioned, Watch Dogs. They seem to do this thing of transitioning straight from the kind of cutscenes or the camera directions right into the action. So there's, it's in-game graphics and it looks very seamless, and did a really good job on that. And it looked like they integrated the controller really well, where you had multiplayers and you had Rayman playing away and you had a guy kind of helping on the touchscreen and things like that. So yeah, it looked like a really nice game. They also then put up some trailers for other. Actually, my comment here is it feels like a cross between New Super Mario Bros. Wii and DKC Returns, Donkey Kong Country Returns. It definitely does. Certainly when I think of New Super Mario Bros., you can even see it in the Nintendo one. There's some elements of it there again. They showed then Zombie U. I really liked the trailer they actually done. It was very stylish, very cool. Seems to be one of the big hits of the show actually. Certainly for the hardcore Wii U side. Touched upon Rabbids Land, U-Shape, Sports Connections, and Skate to Victory. Is that really? Did they actually show that? God, I don't remember that. And Assassin's Creed 3 again, of course. Now, most of that, I think all of them are for the Wii U, so quite a bunch of games. And if you actually look, good diversity. And this is kind of what I mean about having a broad spectrum of games that appeal to different people. You had your Just Dance 4, you have your Far Cries, you have your Raymans, your arcade games, you have your Zombie U, you have your sports games, your shape, fitness games, you have your Assassin's Creed games. Literally something for everyone. A broad range. Like there's more range in that section there now than there was in the entire Sony conference and the entire Microsoft conference. So I mean, surprised. I was very surprised myself by the Ubisoft conference. Did he go on about this esports shoot mania, kind of some sort of I don't know what the hell this is. Some sort of the video actually jumped, so I kind of missed part of it. But it seems to be some sort of uh, paid gaming type of thing, like kind of like making it more like real sports where you have athletes and so on. I don't know. Comments below if you knew what they were going on about. By this stage, I was kind of skipping a bit in early anyway. This showed some other online games and that have been successful: Trials, Evolutions, The Settlers, Ghost Recon, and so on. I was kind of thought it was kind of petering out a little after that shoot me anything and whatnot, but they ended with one game that was actually really surprising. It was initially thought it was called CTOS, but I think it's actually called Watch Dogs. Very hard to describe, very cinematic, all about your digital shadow and how basically everything you do is digitally recorded and tracked and traced, and we're all connected, and everything in the world and different ways is connected and can be controlled, and kind of like a sandbox style experience. That was probably the biggest surprise of any of the conferences, and that includes the Nintendo one, I'd say. Definitely one to watch, and yeah, rounded off a good show, I have to say. So, like, maybe it is an expectation thing. From the platform holders, I expect more, so want to see a bit more of everything from them. Whereas Ubisoft, I expect saw it all. I mean, if I look at that list for the Wii U in particular, and I compare it to their launch crap that they had for the Wii, because they were similarly one of the big partners. I mean, they had Red Steel, which was They had Rabbids, which was spun off into its own piece of garbage. Oh yeah, they actually do have. I did mention it, Rabbids Land. They do have, still rabbits going on, but yeah, that seemed like there could be some good stuff coming there. So maybe they booked up their act. Yeah, surprising. Maybe they've learned from that U-Draw fiasco. So anyway, that's Sony and Ubisoft. Sony, I was a bit disappointed. Good stuff, but would have liked to see more. And Ubisoft, surprisingly decent, despite all the female wood. Anyway, that's it for this section. Join me in part 3 where we'll talk about the big one, I suppose, Nintendo. How did they do? Anyway, hope you liked. I'll put annotations for linking and subscribing, so please do both so you can go to the next part. See you soon!